Hello everyone! I'm Andrew, and today I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in March. Now in March specifically, I made it a point to try to read most of the books that were nominated for the Nebula Awards. These are science fiction and fantasy awards that happen every year. I follow them closely, and I was really excited when the nominees were announced. So I read several of those, a lot of which turned out to be post-apocalyptic stories, but I had a fun time reading those, and I got through several other books as well. So let's start. The first book that I read in March was Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Rowanhorse. This is the first book in her Sixth World series, and it takes place after the world has been devastated by massive floods called the Big Water that wipe out everything under 3,500 feet of elevation. That leaves not much of the United States still uncovered. One of the places that did survive was the Navajo Nation, now reborn as Dinétah, which is Navajo for Navajo. This story follows Maggie Hoskey, who is a young woman who is a monster hunter. She was trained by the legendary Neizgane. By the way, did I mention that the gods, people, spirits, and monsters from Navajo mythology have been reborn into this world? She met Neizgane several years before and he trained her, but he is no longer in her life. The story opens with her hunting down a monster that has kidnapped a young girl. What she finds when she completes this mission, though, is very unusual. This story is very much like Mad Max. If you like those movies, you might like this book. I personally really loved this book. It was one of my favorites of the month, and I'm super excited to read the next book, which comes out later this month, and I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. The world building in this story was excellent, and I thought Rebecca Rowanhorse did a really good job of writing the relationships. In this story, Maggie ends up having to be paired with Kai Arvizo, who is a healer. The two of them work together to try to figure out what's going on, and their relationship has some ups and downs, but I was there for it the entire time. I was really digging it. And that relationship is very well written, in my opinion. She's a killer, he's a healer. They make a bit of an odd couple, but Kai, honestly, is such a soft boy, and as we have established, I love soft boys. In addition, this book has lots of really gory action scenes that are fast-paced and a little bit gross sometimes, but I actually really liked that in text format. I would not have been able to handle it on the big screen, but just reading about it, I could handle it, and I thought they were really cool. I highly recommend this book. Next, I read Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This is about a world where superheroes and supervillains have become prevalent. The supervillains totally wiped out all American government and created an age of anarchy, led by their leader, Ace Anarchy. Superheroes eventually defeated him, and they have set up their own superhero-run government from that point on. So it's kind of a little bit post-apocalyptic, but this story focuses on Nova, who is one of the last remaining anarchists, who are the bad guys, the villains, who are led by Ace Anarchy, and Adrian, who is on the other side with the Renegades, the superheroes. His fathers started the Renegades, and Nova is the niece of Ace Anarchy, the main supervillain. Nova decides to infiltrate the Renegades and pose as a superhero, and the story is about what happens from both of their perspectives. This book was really fun. I love superhero stories in general, and I liked this one. It was definitely a YA book. It had a lot of the YA tropes that we know and love. Some of them I got a little tired of, and honestly I thought this book was a little bit too long, but in general I did like it, and I will be reading the second one. The world that Marissa Meyer has created is very interesting, and some of the superpowers are very interesting as well. Aiden, he's known as Sketch. He can make his drawings come to life, including when he gives himself a tattoo, he can give himself a new superpower. On top of that, the ending of the book really caught my attention, but I cannot give that away because of spoilers. You should read it and find out, and I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. After that, I read Blackfish City by Sam J. Miller. This was also a Nebula nominee. Oh, and I forgot to mention Trail of Lightning was another Nebula nominee. This story is set in the city of Kanak. Kanak is a floating city in the middle of the ocean, long after climate change, economic disasters, and wars have totally devastated most of the rest of the Earth. Kanak is the one oasis, the one paradise in the world that people flock to. But it's not all rainbows and sunshine. This story follows 4 main characters and tells the story from all of their perspectives alternately. It has a gay main character, it has a genderqueer and intersex main character, It has two prominent lesbian side characters, and I was really impressed by how queer it was. This is the story of the community and what happens when disease breaks out and what happens to the community when greed takes over. But it starts simply enough with a woman riding an orca and dragging a polar bear into the city. She is called the Orcamancer, and a lot of this mystery revolves around why she is there in the city in the first place. However, don't expect answers very quickly. It takes a while to build up to that, but I really appreciated exploring the other characters and their lives before we got to that point of the big mystery and the action and the showdown. This is a very imaginative view of the future that has lots of elements of modern day. Capitalism, greed, the bottom rung versus the top rung, and it was wonderfully weird. I really liked that about this story. However, I felt like some of the relationships between characters were not fully fleshed out. I felt like a lot of the characters were well developed, but when it came to how they related to each other, I didn't quite get all that I wanted from that. However, I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. Next, I read Bloom, which is a graphic novel by Kevin Panetta and Savannah Ganesh about Ari and Hector. I've already talked about this book in my favorite graphic novels video that I did recently, so head over there if you want more information. But this is just a very cute romance. Ari works at his family's bakery but wants to leave to go to the city to perform music with his friends. Hector loves baking and gets a job at the bakery when Ari is looking for his replacement. A relationship begins to develop between the two, and it is really, really, really cute. This story is full of love and full of baking. It is so heartfelt, and I just felt warm reading it. It has a really, really cute gay romance. It gave me the gay romance feels that I need, and I would recommend this to anyone who wants something light and fluffy. But also, I did feel like the ending was a little bit too abrupt. Things were resolved very quickly, and I would have liked a little bit more development on the back end of this novel. But I liked it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. After Bloom, I read Chainbreaker by Tara Sim, which is the second book in the Timekeeper series. If you don't know what this series is about, it's set in an alternate, magical, steampunk version of our world in the 1800s. It's set in London, where mechanics have the ability to see and manipulate time, and they use that to repair clock towers that keep the flow of time running. In the first book, Danny meets and falls in love with a spirit of the clock tower named Colton. In this book, they have to go to India to deal with some mysterious clock towers that are falling without time stopping. This book was pretty good. I thought it was a good sequel follow-up to the first book, which helped expand the world and the backstory. There were some very shocking twists and turns. The last third of this book was incredibly gripping and had me glued to my seat. It dragged a little bit before that, but in general, I really liked this. There were some very surprising revelations throughout this book. However, I feel like the series still needs to develop some of the characters a little bit more. A couple of them were a little bit forgettable, but I'm hoping that the third book will do that, which I'm definitely going to pick up as soon as possible. And I gave this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. Everybody probably knows about this story. It is her second book after The Hate U Give. It is about Bree, an aspiring actor who is living in Garden Heights. Her family's not very well off financially. Some stuff happens to her that brings her career in rapping and her life as she knows it almost to a halt, and things start to take a different direction for her. I can't say much without giving important plot points away, but I think this story is very important. Also, this book really re-emphasized the importance of rap to me, not just as music or poetry, but as a tool for social change. Bree, the main character, has a lot of successes, a lot of failures, a lot of mistakes, and those really drive the story forward. I felt like it was much more character-driven than The Hate U Give, and I really liked that about it. However, I did not like it as a whole as much as The Hate U Give, but it was still really, really great. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Up next is another Nebula nominee, and it is The Calculating Stars by Mary Robinette Kowal. This book is set in an alternate past where, in the early 50s, a meteor strikes Earth and we have to evacuate the planet before it becomes uninhabitable. The main character, Elma, was a woman Air Force support pilot in World War II, and she believes she has the skills to become an astronaut, but women are not currently allowed in the astronaut program. She has to fight for what she wants, and it has a lot of really cool space feels. I really love NASA in the 50s through the 60s when the Gemini, Mercury, and Apollo programs were happening, and this gave me a lot of really nerd feels that I loved. I really like space a lot. After superheroes, it's my number 2 favorite subject, and this really gave that to me. This also highlighted the misogyny of the time and in space travel, but also it was empowering. It was a story about women fighting for what they wanted, even though they shouldn't have had to fight for that in the first place. And also, I have a personal connection to the story. My mom is one of the few female pilots in the country, and so seeing another female pilot represented was really, really awesome. It perfectly balanced space jargon, characterization, and plot, and I liked it so much. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I went straight from that book into another Nebula nominee, which is Witchmark by C.L. Polk. This book is set in a fantasy world inspired by post-World War I Edwardian England. The main character, Miles, is a psychiatrist in a veterans hospital, and he has to see the scars of war in all of his patients. One day, a mysterious man dies on his table and tells him something mysterious, because this man knows that Miles is secretly a witch. Witches are frowned upon in the society, and they're thought to all go crazy. However, secretly, the upper echelon society, the 100 families, are all witches and mages. They control society with their powers. And this story has set up a really, really interesting society based on magic, which was really interesting to discover throughout the book. I thought Miles was an interesting character. He was compelled to help his patients. And he meets an interesting man named Tristan Hunter. Tristan Hunter is mysterious but gorgeous. Miles begins working with him and maybe develops feelings for him. This book starts out as a murder mystery that turns into something truly epic by the end. I thought some parts of it throughout were a little bit bland, but overall the story is really good. Maybe it could have been a little bit shorter, but I liked it, and the ending was so amazing. The only other complaint I have is that I thought the character of Tristan could have been a little bit more fleshed out. He was mostly there to be mysterious, and he didn't actually get a lot of character development, but I'm hoping he will in the second book. But overall, I liked this, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The last book I read in March totally destroyed me, and it is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I have had this book on my TBR for a while, ever since I very first heard Cece from Problems of a Book Nerd talk about it on her channel, but I didn't get around to it until now, and I don't know why I waited. It is so amazing. This is the story of Frances, who is a biracial black girl in England, frantically studying, trying to get into Cambridge. She is head girl, she is top of her school, she has great grades, but she is very worried about her future. Then she meets Aled, a boy who happens to live across the street and also just so happens to produce the one thing that she cares about that is not school, the podcast Universe City. She is obsessed with it, she does fan art for it, and one day, the creator, who is Aled across the street, contacts her and asks her to do official art for the podcast. She and Aled begin to develop a friendship that does not in any way turn into romance. This is just about platonic love, friendship, and how it can affect you and change you, and what our friends mean to us. This book wrecked me in so many ways, and I love it. I cried through a little bit of it, and I am really excited to read more of Alice Oseman's books. This is one of the best written relationships I've ever seen, and it's not a romantic relationship, which is awesome. Also, this book is really, really queer. It has characters who are bisexual, gay, asexual, and demisexual, all of which are words that are said on the page, which is awesome. This book explores the stress of school and striving for success. It delves a little bit into fandom and internet culture, which I think are themes that Alice Oseman explores expertly. These characters are some of my new favorite characters of all time, and I will stand them until the end of time. And I just want to go look at fan art from this story online now because I'm getting all the feels again. And I love this book so much, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Well, that is my entire March wrap-up. I read 9 things, and I had a great reading month. Lots of really good books. There were no bad books. I liked all of them this month, which is amazing. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video eventually. Bye!